I'm here today to talk about patient advocacy and the Open Pharma recommendations for plain language summaries of peer-reviewed medical journal publications. My name is Adeline Rosenberg, and I'm a medical writer in the patient engagement and Open Pharma teams at Oxford Pharmagenesis. These are my disclosures. The purpose of this virtual mini-series is to raise awareness for Real-World Evidence 2022, which focuses on rare diseases and will take place in London in June. And this will feature a talk from Richard White, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Oxford Pharmagenesis, on achieving transparency in the generation and use of real-world evidence. My talk today will consist of two parts. First, looking at Open Pharma and plain language summaries, and secondly, looking at patient advocacy. So first of all, what is Open Pharma? Well, we are a multi-sponsor collaboration facilitated by Oxford Pharmagenesis, and we aim to drive positive change in the communication of pharma-sponsored research. You can see on the right here our financial members and supporters for 2021, but the Open Pharma network is in fact much wider, and we do interact and work with many more groups than is shown on here. Our website is openpharma.blog, and we're also around on Twitter and LinkedIn, so do please reach out. Previous Open Pharma activities, especially in 2019, focused on open access, and in 2019 we launched our position statement on open access, saying that we as Open Pharma recognise the importance of publishing research open access and allowing papers to be read without payment, and we believe that this will improve patient care, advance medical science, speed up dissemination, globalise communication of research, and increase transparency. You can read the full position statement on our website, and you can in fact endorse it and sign your name against it as well. But in 2021, our activities have focused more on plain language summaries, and this culminated in the publication of our recommendations in September 21 in Current Medical Research and Opinion. And so our recommendations were the result of a lot of hard work from the Open Pharma accessibility workstream, and the content was driven by an expert roundtable and a focused public consultation. And the purpose of our recommendations is to provide a foundational standard for plain language summaries that allow research to be shared in broad and an understandable way. The publication was also accompanied by an editorial commentary written by Richard Smith, who is the chair of Patients Know Best and also former editor-in-chief of the BMJ. So why is access to information in plain language important in the first place? Well, fundamentally, access to science is a human right. Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that everyone has the right freely to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. And further to that, trust in pharmaceutical research is low, which is especially problematic during a global pandemic. So providing accessible information is really part of our commitment to transparency as medical publication professionals. And to me, it's a moral responsibility. Plain language can benefit multiple audience types, from patients and caregivers to healthcare professionals to patient advocacy organisations and charities. And providing medical information in plain language allows these stakeholders to have informed discussions and to engage with each other. For example, in an online survey, patients ranked articles in scientific journals as their third most important source of online health-related information. And in the same survey, healthcare professionals said that they considered plain language summaries to be valuable and that it would help inform patient dialogue. But plain language as well benefits a much wider, more diverse audience than just the medical community. So we're talking about the public, the media, policymakers. This is especially important in considering misinformation. Part of the reason that that the public can sometimes be prone to misinformation, as explained here by Brian Southwell, is that it is so convenient and accessible and ubiquitous. And so it's our responsibility, again, as medical publication professionals, to provide information that serves their needs by ensuring that credible information is just as convenient, just as accessible, and just as ubiquitous as the misinformation. So we're talking about plain language summaries here today. So what is a PLS? Well, it is a synopsis written in plain language that is associated with a peer-reviewed medical journal publication, and it presents it in a jargon-free, more readable way. The scope is limited to the content of the manuscript, And currently there's no universal style or format that is set in stone, and variations are often down to authors and journal policies. And just to clarify, I'm not talking today about trial result summaries, which are of course the public disclosure mandated by the EU clinical trial regulation. And the benefit of having that mandate means that trial result summaries are already fairly standardized across the board. You know, there's variations between content and format, but you know, across sponsors and agencies, we can see that standardizing has helped create quality. But on the other hand, there is much greater diversity in plain language summaries, and they can range from anything from a full page or multi-page infographic to a graphical abstract to a text-based summary that can in fact be indexed on PubMed. There's also, of course, plain language summaries of publications, or PLSs, which are entire secondary manuscripts written in plain language that are associated with a previously published primary scientific manuscript, but that are in fact standalone, citable, peer-reviewed manuscripts in their own right, and these are published by Future Science Group. And there's a dedicated website to finding out more about them at plainlanguagesummaries.com. And as an example, PLSPs can help increase understanding and engagement by taking the information from this very dry scientific presentation to this more engaging presentation. For more information on some of the differences between these different types of plain language documents, we do have a crib sheet available on the Open Pharma resource page on our website. So what are the fundamental needs for a plain language summary that is associated with a manuscript? Well, it should be, first of all, integral to the peer-reviewed publication. It needs to be accessible, meaning both financially accessible, so preferably published open access or at least in front of a paywall, but also written and presented accessibly. They need to be credible and of high quality, and they need to be discoverable, such as being indexed on PubMed. And the need for a standard came about because, as we've seen with trial result summaries, standardization improves quality. And so any standard that for plain language summaries that comes into effect needs to consider multiple stakeholder perspectives. So for a minimum standard, we have outlined what we know is possible for research sponsors, authors and publishers. So ensuring that plain language summaries are cost effective and easy to produce and feasible for those who are creating them. But we also need to ensure that plain language summaries are fit for purpose. So they need to be inclusive and accessible to multiple audience types. They need to consider end user needs, and they need to be discoverable within the systems we currently have, which is PubMed. So if we take a look at what the Open Pharma recommendations look like in practice, the first recommendation is that plain language summaries should be targeted towards a broad and inclusive audience. So writing for non-technical, non-specialist or time-poor readers, and really just writing for everyone who's engaging with medical research, which includes patients, but is not limited solely to patients. Plain language summaries should be written in easily understandable language, should be unbiased and non-promotional, and free of jargon, so ensuring that it is accessible to that wide range of readers. And they should also follow health literacy best practices. As a minimum, plain language summaries should be text-based and concise, and this will allow for them to be indexed in directories such as PubMed to help maximize discoverability. And this also enables more straightforward translation on an individual level for people who can copy and paste directly into, for example, Google Translate, or if they have browser translation settings enabled already. If content is embedded in a PDF, this is a less straightforward process. Plain language summaries really need to link to their source publication, and if it's a clinical PLS, then any clinical trial identifiers. And this is really important because we can't ensure that plain language summaries are always going to be presented in the context of their source. So ensuring that we have a link back to it maintains that quality. Plain language summaries should be consistent with the same overall key points and messages within the scientific publication to ensure that we're conveying the same conclusions and messages. Plain language summaries should be developed alongside the main content of the manuscript, and this will help ensure the concurrent development will help ensure that it meets the ICMJE authorship criteria. So having, the named authors take part in reviewing and approving content as they are doing so with the manuscript. Though, of course, plain language summaries can also be developed retrospectively. And so in these cases, perhaps approval from a single author may be considered sufficient, such as the first or last or corresponding author. Plain language summaries really ideally need to be reviewed by a non-expert during development, because it's all about the end user and considering the end user needs and making sure that it's fit for purpose. Plain language summaries do need to be fully peer reviewed alongside the main content of the manuscript, because part of what lends that credibility to publications is the peer review process. So we need to apply those same rules to plain language summaries as well. Really quite critically, plain language summaries need to be made available to read free of charge. Again, preferably open access, but at least being in front of a paywall, because if it's behind a paywall, then it's not benefiting the people who need it. And lastly, plain language summaries should be tagged with appropriate metadata and keywords to help improve discoverability and search engine optimization. So of course, scientific and clinical publications will use mesh terms, but think about including plain language keywords as well. So high blood pressure in addition to hypertension. So people who are using those plain language terms to find content can then find it that way. The Open Pharma recommendations are really a foundational standard, and we do strongly encourage the additional inclusion of other enhanced formats, such as infographics and video abstracts and patient perspectives. And this is a position that is also endorsed by Taylor and Francis, who have the capacity to host graphical PLS, but only in addition to a written PLS. So I'm going to turn now to my personal journey and my rare disease patient advocacy. This is me, Adeline, the medical writer. And this is me, Adeline, the patient. I'm both of these concurrently. Patient advocacy to me means being a patient partner. So I am on a steering committee as a rare disease patient representative at the University of Oxford for the Oxford Patient Engagement Network for Arthritis and Musculoskeletal Conditions. And here I get to engage directly with researchers and other members of the university and help inform their public engagement and patient outreach. Patient advocacy also means community. So you can see here on the left an example from Twitter. We have the hashtag NEISVoid, which is used across many rare disease and chronic illness therapy areas to bring together community. And we have an example of someone expressing gratitude to the community for feeling support from other members. But then there's also queries about diagnosis, queries about symptoms, or even fundraising efforts for mobility aids. Our next example is from Instagram, where I co-run a patient advocacy page called Talking Heads. And in the example, we can see that it generates conversation, bringing together people who, for example, have the symptoms, but are still kind of searching for a diagnosis. And it's all about that kind of engagement and discussion. And the last example is a WhatsApp group. Patient advocacy also means self-advocacy, and especially in the case of chronic illness and rare disease patients and their caregivers, it's really crucial that we're able to self-advocate, because too often we have to learn to speak the doctor's language and we have to meet them at their level. Plain language summaries can help with self-advocacy in two ways. First, by providing healthcare professionals with the language to enable better dialogue so they can communicate with us at our level, but it also provides us with understandable and digestible research information so we can engage directly with the research. And ultimately, this enables a shared decision-making process and patient-centric care. So the Open Pharma recommendations are personal for me. It was a big part of my patient journey, and part of me contributing back to my community. And this was just a really nice quote from Alan Thomas, who is a patient advocate and founder of the charity and patient organisation Ataxia and Me. And he said, "A plain language summary to me, it is an improvement in quality of life." So thank you for listening. Here's my contact information if you'd like to reach out and find out more about anything that I've covered off, either Open Pharma, Open Access, plain language summaries, or patient advocacy. I'm very happy to talk. Thank you.